Thank you for joining me for another Quick Hits conversation. I'm Dr. Robyn. With me today, I have Stewart Wiggins. He's with Anduna Advisors, where he offers fractional chief operating officer services and brings resources together to help scale your business. I also have Jim Tam. He's a principal client director at Korn Ferry's Digital Group, where he advises organizations on how to improve their sales effectiveness through using world-class sales methodology and technology. The question I have for the two of you today: what do you need to be true to feel engaged in a project? Jim, can you kick us off?
I always like to understand the whys of everything before I start. What is the outcome that we're hoping to accomplish? It just gives me more conviction when I allocate time. And I thought a little bit about this question. It's like, well, if I'm a professional, shouldn't I attack every project the same way? I get paid to do a job and everything should be done similarly. I always feel like I understand the whys of what I'm doing. I tend to do a little bit more conviction and kind of understand or anticipate better challenges that might be coming up later.
I would say, I was actually going to say the exact same thing. I mean, I've been involved in projects where you knew that it was basically a paper chase. It wasn't going to be taken seriously, or you weren't going to have the resource. I think it's important to have resources for me to be engaged in a project. I think it's important that it's going to get to the right audience. If it seems or feels like it's going to be a waste of time, then how can anybody be engaged? I think Jim and I are saying the same thing. To feel engaged, you have to feel like that there is, I'll use this, a light at the end of the tunnel. What's it going to be used for?
Yeah, I think for me, one thing I've noticed is, so I do a lot of advising. That's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found is I don't want to be in a project where I'm there just as a token, oh, we have to have an advisor, and they don't listen. They're not interested in my opinion. I have a board right now that I'm on where I really feel like the CEO just has people because he needs a board of directors, but he has all the answers and he doesn't make changes based on what the board says. And that makes me want to walk away, because why am I there? What's the point? If I ask questions and you say a whole bunch of words and then just go do what you were going to do anyway, why am I wasting my time?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Because it's always a zero-sum game. Because if you're allocating time to something, you're taking away from something else. And if you're not going to be working with people that are going to be cooperative or care or recognize your input as being valued, then spend your time elsewhere.
Yeah.
I've been involved in a lot of projects, civilian and military. And I think that military projects, at least in my case, tended to have more of a engagement, because you were attempting to solve for something that potentially had life or death consequence. Whereas in the civilian, I've been in a number of projects where you're working towards X. And at some point, and maybe it's because of the project, you discover that what you're working towards really isn't going to address the hypotheses in a way that whoever put the project together thought it would. And then it's almost like this collective, like, well, we wasted our time to this point.
Then you have to be careful about chasing your losses, because I feel like it's so easy once you get so far down a path to just be like, well, we're this far, let's keep going, even though you realize this isn't productive. I think pulling the plug is a big sign of a good leader.
Yeah. In my role in business development, I've done a lot of RFPs, and you just kind of know that this is an exercise that procurement sent out, and there's really no zero chance or likelihood that you're going to win this deal. And sometimes I think it's almost like borderline unethical to get people engaged and have them working on stuff when there's no opportunity or upside for them whatsoever, like asking to be on a board where people don't care.
How do you tell, how early in a project can you tell, is this a waste of time, and can you pull the plug? I recognize if you're employed, you can't really just say, this is a waste of time, I'm going to a different project.
I think it's important to be able to have the latitude to ask a lot of questions at the outset. Project actually starts, kind of set the parameters. What does success look like? I already mentioned, what are the resources that are going to be available to this? And are they trying to create a self-fulfilling prophecy by what they want the results to be? I mean, because if you don't get clear definition on some of those things, and there's many more, then at some point you're going to realize in the project, well, what am I doing here? So maybe the one thing we're all saying is that if it feels like it's going to be a waste of time, then that's a non-starter.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
So when we're talking about engagement, it sounds like what we're saying is we want to make sure that what we're doing is going to make a difference. We want to understand that the project, where it's going, that there is some goal in mind, that we know what's happening, and that we want management that listens. Is that what I'm hearing?
But I still want to go back to having the resources, because
Oh, right. I left that one out.
I think that too often you get into a project and you need, have you ever done a Six Sigma project?
Mhm.
Okay, so you know what I mean? If you don't have the resources to vet this thing out completely, then early on you're going to figure out, well, what are we doing here?
And when you say resources, expand on that. What does that mean?
It could be financial. It could be the ability to go outside to get professional input from people that aren't in the formal part of the group. It could be a number of those things that impact your ability to get engaged. I mean, the bottom line is, if you want to have a project, then have everything in place so that the project can either vet out the hypotheses or not.
I think one thing we haven't talked about, Robyn and Stewart, is personal gain. Am I going to be rewarded or recognized in some way for doing this project, and the outcome is as desired? For salespeople, obviously you engage in an opportunity and you want to get paid on the commission, or if you think it's really going to benefit the company, or if it's a nonprofit type of thing, they're doing some good in the world. But there's always an element of personal gain in terms of for a person to be truly engaged in a project as well.
I think that's true. I think that people see it as selfish. I had a situation where a company came to me and they wanted me to do a project with them. And they said, oh, but there's not a lot of money. We're only going to pay you this little tiny number. And I was like, that is like a third or even less than what I usually make. What's the benefit of this? And they're like, well, if we get our foot in the door, whatever. And I said, that's for your company. Getting your foot in the door is for your company. That's not a burden that I should bear, because that's not for me. The next project you get with them, you may not use me. So I shouldn't bear that for you. If you want me to be on this project to help you get your foot in the door for this company, you need to compensate me appropriately. And they chose not to. And I got a little bit of noise about, well, that's selfish. Your company's bottom line is not my problem. And I don't think people are confident enough to say that. I to be fair, it felt awkward for me to say it, but I needed to.
I think that's important, because you're investing your time. You have a monetary value on your time, but your time is worth so much more than that monetary value that you have. So it's important to set those out. I'm thinking clear parameters around the project are the way to proceed at the outset. And I still like to understand what success could potentially look like out of this project. And I'm not naysaying projects, but projects are important. The reason why I always talk about parameters is because I'm sure we've all been involved in a project where you get scope creep.
Oh, yeah.
and then this thing goes longer, and then you get off the path, and then you don't achieve what you thought you were going to achieve, and then nobody takes the project seriously, or they don't take you seriously enough for future projects, particularly the project leader.
And I think there's a difference in a project that's in a big corporation that has like certain bounded financial situations, and a startup. I mean, I've been involved in startups. I've advised startups, and it's a mess. But generally speaking, when you ask questions, people either say, that's a really good question, let us think about that, let's come up with an answer to that, or they're like, this is the answer. You never get, we don't know, we'll see where it looks like when we get there. Like, you don't get that. And I think that for me, that's a red flag. If I start asking questions and everybody's like, yeah, we don't really know, we'll see. I'm like, that may not be good.
Yeah. I always look at projects, probability of winning or the project being a success, the time and commitment that's required, and personal gain. And I'll be selfish. I would not be honest if I said that there isn't an element of personal gain that's involved.
I think that's true with everybody. And you both may have heard me say this. There is no such thing as people who do something for nothing. That altruism idea, that's not a thing. Everybody has skin in the game every time. All right, gentlemen, that is our 10 minutes. Thank you for having this conversation with me. I do think that we all could be better served to pay more attention to what makes us want to be engaged in a project before we get there. So thanks so much for doing this with me, and I look forward to speaking to each of you again really soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robyn.